we say amen. I'll leave the jokes for the politicians because I stole all theirs the other day. I would now like to introduce the director and my really close friend, Pete Skirbo.
Thank you, Steve. I don't know whether that was an invocation or the first volume of the Old Testament, but
I'll take your confession later.
good morning, and I want to thank all of you for coming here this morning, coming out on a beautiful day, beautiful sunny day. It's actually a warm spell today. I looked at the temperature in my car driving over here, and it said 15 degrees. So, once again, thank you for coming. Sit back and enjoy the breakfast this morning that we've prepared for you. Because today is an important day for Bergen County as we come together to rededicate the best of ourselves to the important work of finding new ways to grow new capacity to meet the untreated mental health needs of individuals and families throughout the communities. Today, Comprehensive Behavioral Health Care is proud to announce the opening of the first walk-in wellness and support center in Bergen County, located at 569 Broadway in Westwood. We are pleased today to have our county executive, Kathleen Donovan, formally cut the ribbon earlier this morning. And it is now my pleasure to welcome Kathy to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everybody. We did just cut the ribbon before we came here. If you have not been to the building in Westwood, please go. It's beautiful, but it's also laid out well, and I think a lot of people will get not only first treatment there, but will begin to get much healthier at that place. So by all means, go see it because it's a great asset to all of us. I'm only going to talk for a couple of minutes, but when we're talking about this whole area of health and mental health, it's our individual and our collective responsibility to help our constituents, to help, for some people, it's to help their clients, and for others, it's to help their patients who are experiencing anxiety, depression, and we all know crises, to find their way back to stabilization, to hope, and productive lives. Any of you who have ever dealt with folks who are in a crisis know how terrifying it is for them, but terrifying for you as well. If you're their caregiver or you like them, never mind love them, just like them, and you know they're in crisis, it's really, really difficult. There are excellent resources in our county, and I look forward to working with you and help end the whole horror of individuals ending their own lives and that of others by letting the public know of the network of community mental health centers, including working with the community centers and our county centers, which exist to serve them, and working with them to identify whatever voids there are in the system. I'm thanking you also for the work that you do in our personal lives and in our public lives. We see many people who need help, and many of you have helped them along the way. I know from personal experiences, I know from experiences in government that people have come and shared with me their stories. So I thank all of you who are there to help them because it is critically important. You do great work in sometimes the most difficult of circumstances. I salute you all and I thank you, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the program. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Kathleen. Kathy is a longtime supporter of community mental health and also comprehensive behavioral health care. We go back a long way. I knew Kathy when she was first starting her law practice in Lyndhurst. So she's come a long way. Thank you. You know, we are truly honored this morning to have 3 state senators participating in our program here today. And we are especially honored to have the former governor, Richard J. Cody, the champion of mental health services in New Jersey, and who has the distinction of being the longest-serving legislator New Jersey ever had. Senator Cody has been serving the public interest for 40 consecutive years. He has spent 8 years in the Assembly and 32 in the Senate, and he has seen 310 of the bills that he has proposed passed through the Senate. Senator Cody and his wife have founded a new nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing awareness, and I know we all want to hear about their plans and aspirations. So will you please join me in welcoming the former governor and current Senator Richard J. Cody. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. But I got to be honest with you. I have passed this place a million times going to that Rock League Country Club that I hate going to because it takes an hour or so. It's practically New York State, you know? So I finally got to come here. Thank you very much. Maybe we could get the chairman to have some functions here, you know? Be a lot easier. But it's good to see the county executive, Kathy, Mayor of Westwood, my good friend Joan Voss, Jim Tedesco, Bob Gordon. Is there anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody. Republican or Democrat? I don't have to get involved in those fights. By the way, last night I went over to see Seton Hall play St. John's. And by the way, it took me 2.5 hours to get there and 45 minutes to get home. So I said, boy, now I feel like the people at Fort Lee, you know? I feel your pain. By the way, I was commiserating with my sister about the trip last night, but so it reminds me of a story. Where's Father? Where'd you go? There you are, Father. It's the story of the two young Irish lads who were going to church on Saturday for confession. Saturday, that's when we go. That's when we go. Okay. I'll get you back. Don't worry about it. So it's Danny and Tim, and Tim says, I don't want to go. Danny says, well, I'll go into confession. So he goes into the confessional. It's, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And he says, Father, I fooled around with a girl. And he says, is this Danny Sullivan? He says, yes, Father, it's me. He says, well, who was this girl that you fooled around with? He says, was it Aaron O'Gara? He says, Father, that's not right. I can't say that. He says, well, was it Colleen McNamara? He says, again, Father, I can't say that. And he says, well, was it Mary Smith? He says, again, Father, I can't say that. So Father says to him, all right, Danny, but here's your penance. 20 Hail Marys and 20 Our Fathers. And since you're an altar boy, you cannot be an altar boy for 6 months. Bless me, Father, and he leaves. He goes in the pew and he says his prayers. He goes outside. Timmy's waiting for him. He said, Danny, how'd you do? He says, how'd I do? He said, I did great. What do you mean great? He says, I got 6 months off and I got 3 great prospects. Well, I wish that happened to me when I was an altar boy. Listen, I just wanted to, first of all, thank CBH for what you do every day, in every way, for the people up here, and in Morris. By the way, Bob Davison's here from Essex County, and I think we have the best executive director of any mental health association we could possibly have. This guy's absolutely fabulous. He was one of the big shots on my committee when I was governor. We created a task force on mental health and did almost, I think Bob had about 100 recommendations, and we did 90 of them. Give him a round of applause. He deserves it. By the way, I know you shelter people at night. Let me tell you a story. I guess it was about a year ago, and Bob helped me with this. When I went undercover in a shelter in the city of Newark, and this shelter advertised beds, so forth and so on, come in and take care of you. And through Bob, I learned that there is a real discrimination against men when it comes to shelters. They don't want men because they feel they may be violent. So if you need a bed at night, it's 20, 30 times easier if you're a female and if you have kids, it's not that big of a problem. If you're a male, it's a problem. There's very, very few beds. And if you're mentally ill, they really don't want you. So I had Bob kind of grease the skids for me to get in. He had one of his social workers said, listen, we got somebody who's homeless, just discharged from Beth Israel, some mental issues, never been violent. So Bob and some others take me to the place that night, and there's an argument that ensues between the two supervisors as to whether or not I'm going to be allowed to stay because there's a slight history of mental illness. Well, I was eventually allowed to stay. And by the way, there is no beds. We slept on the floor. All we got was a thin blanket, and the people who run the place had pillows. We didn't get any pillows. But when you think about it, in the state of New Jersey, there's roughly about 12,000 people with mental illness who are homeless out of the 12,000, and who's taking care of them on a daily basis? You know, when we think about where we are going, I was up at Morristown Hospital, I'd say only about a week ago. And they're telling me they're going to open a new psych ward. Now, I haven't heard that in a long time in any hospital in the state of New Jersey, which gives me some hope. But on the other hand, what's happened to us the last few years, can you imagine that Hagedorn was closed down? Now, if you've ever been there, it's the most idyllic setting you'd ever want to see. And by the way, most of it's undevelopable, and it was actually blessed by Mother Teresa. We had a committee of people who were overwhelmingly chosen by the governor, but there was 4 legislators, 2 Republican, 2 Democrats. All the legislators agreed not to close it. And then eventually, the providers, who obviously have a conflict, who were appointed by the governor, sided with us and recommended not to close Hagedorn. Unfortunately, as we know, despite the vote, the governor decided to proceed to try to close Hagedorn. 2 developmental centers, right? Woodbridge and up in Passaic County, slated for closure. If your loved one is up in North Jersey, you have to drive almost 3 hours to Vineland, New Jersey because of politics. Wrong. Absolutely, totally wrong. And very, very unfortunate. You know, I saw a headline in USA Today about 2 months ago. The headline was 50% of all hospitalizations of vets are because of mental illness. Think about that. You know, you would think they were injured in war and, you know, they got these injuries trying to recuperate. No, mental illness, mental illness. Now, if that were something else, I think there'd be a human cry. But because there's a stigma, as you and I both know, attached to mental illness, no big deal, a headline in a paper, so forth and so on. And we know, you know, the stigma, if you're female, you're so much more likely to seek help than if you're a male. Because if you're a man, you know, man up. Come on. You're a man. You know, you can't get depressed. You're the head of a household. So, what happens? We all know that they let it go too long. The whole family suffers. And then, if you're a minority, you're much less likely to seek help because in most of the minority community, again, That's a, come on, you gotta be strong, man. You gotta be strong. And then we get into subtext in the minority community. There's actually people, if you tell them you're depressed, who will perform an exorcism on you. Believe me, it goes on. I know, I come from Essex County, and it happens. That happens. It absolutely happens. What a shame. That tells you the fight that we're up against, and up against every day. By the way, you know, a lot of people assume, because my wife went public with her struggles, that that's my interest, because of that, that's my interest in mental illness, but it predates me even meeting my wife. I was born and raised in a funeral home. Oh, who's the mayor here? It's a funeral director. Am I right? Oh, okay, he introduced himself to me. I guess he got a call. God bless him. Hey, it's the business. It is what it is. You know? I got a call. Oh, that's great. But in those days, I'm about 19. You know, I would have to go around the hospitals, wherever, and pick up dead bodies. And I'm sent up to Greystone Psychiatric Hospital to pick up a dead body. And the way they would do it in those days is you go to the main office, they'd give you a key and a patient to help you at the morgue. And the patient they gave me, good morning, Senator Weinberg. You weren't caught up in traffic, right? Okay. Good to see you, dear. So I go to the morgue with this young man, and he's telling me horror stories about what's going on at Greystone. So when I left there, I said to myself, geez, if I ever get in a position to help people with mental illness who are poor and in many cases abandoned by their families, I want to help them. And sure enough, I become chairman of the Senate Health Committee back in the early 80s, and I'm able to do what I do. I went undercover at Marlborough Psychiatric Hospital as an orderly. We were able to close that place down. Before we did, when I exposed what I saw and heard, the president and 35 employees were fired. And as I said, eventually the hospital closed down. But then something else happened to me, which was up close and personal. My first child was born October 21st, 1984. And my wife, during the pregnancy, was not herself. So after she gave birth, she came to me and said, I'm depressed and I have thoughts about harming Kevin. So I immediately called the psychiatrist and got her help right away. And after a couple of weeks, the psychiatrist called me and said, listen, your wife is seriously depressed. She needs to be hospitalized. Now picture this. I got married when I was 36. You know, typical Irish guy staying at home, you know. You can relate to that, right, Loretta? So, still have one at home. I'm in the same boat now. So, I mean, I'm 38 years old, and my wife is going to have to go to a psychiatric hospital. I'm alone with the child, though. Thank God I had mom and her mom. And I'm driving her down to the Carrier Clinic, and I'm upset. And there's tears in my eyes. And my wife's telling me to divorce her because she doesn't think she'll ever get well, and to marry somebody who would be a good mother to our child. And the weeks previous to her hospitalization, she wouldn't speak to her family, she wouldn't talk to her friends, only to me. She, when she got her prescriptions, would go to a drugstore 10 miles away so nobody would hear what kind of medication she was on. So that showed me in a very vivid way of how embarrassed she was. But the big difference was that my wife said to me, I need help. And so many people are afraid to say, I need help. And that's why we started a foundation, to make people understand there should be no embarrassment, there should be no shame to get help for mental health. But when my wife came back from the hospital, she was all right, but not her old self, and eventually wanted to have another child. She's a teacher of special need kids, kindergarten through 3rd grade, loves kids. And we always wanted to have 3 kids, and by the way, I said to her, and she agreed. We're going to have 3 kids. We're going to give them middle initials X, Y, and Z. Xavier, Yale, and Zane. So she said that once to Governor Florio, and Governor Florio said to her, "Why would you let Dick do that?" She says, "I was happy he didn't want to start with the letter A." True story. So in any event, she wants to get pregnant again, and the doctor says to her, "Well, the medications you're on," and there was no Prozac back in '89, would harm the fetus. So you got to get those out of your system. She does. She becomes pregnant instantly, and eventually goes back into a deep depression. So they told her, "You've got 2 options: either abort, or you can have shock therapy treatments." Now, they didn't know for sure, but they were very strong in their opinion that it wouldn't harm the fetus. So she went through 8 or 10 shock therapy treatments when she was about 7 months pregnant. And believe me, I insisted that I stay in the room despite the protest of the doctors. And to see your wife go through that with your child is not easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And she eventually stopped those treatments, and she gave birth. And I say within a month she was on Prozac, and she was really good. And then unfortunately the psychiatrist who was treating her got some notoriety out of treating her, over-medicated her, and I get a call from my son